In 2011, walking through the streets of Miami, everyone around him looked at him like an enemy. So what would you do? You achieved your biggest dream, but everyone hates you. At night when LeBron James came home, what he told his family would shock everyone. But to understand that moment, we need to go back to where it all started. Because sometimes, the greatest betrayal isn't what people think it is. July 8th, the lights were blinding. LeBron James sat in that chair at the Boys and Girls Club in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the entire world was watching. Not just basketball fans. Everyone. The president was watching. Kids in Africa were watching. His mother was watching. Tears already forming in her eyes, because she knew what was coming. I'm taking my talents to South Beach. 8 words. That's all it took to turn a hero into a villain. In Cleveland, people were burning his jersey in the streets. Not just throwing them away, burning them. The owner of the Cavaliers, Dan Gilbert, wrote a letter in Comic Sans font calling him a coward, a traitor, a quitter. The vitriol was immediate, and it was everywhere. But here's what nobody understood that night. LeBron James had spent 7 years in Cleveland, 7 years carrying a franchise on his back, 7 years making the playoffs with rosters that shouldn't have made the playoffs, 7 years watching other superstars team up while he was expected to do it alone. Kobe had Pau Gasol. The Celtics had their big Dirk had a complete team in Dallas. And LeBron, he had nobody. The 2007 Finals was the perfect example. He dragged that Cavaliers team through the Eastern Conference on sheer willpower alone. Then they faced the San Antonio Spurs, and reality hit like a freight train. He was 22 years old playing with Daniel Gibson and Sasha Pavlovich as his supporting cast against Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili. It was a massacre. They got swept, and the look in his eyes during Game 4 told you everything you needed to know. He was alone, but when he decided to team up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami, suddenly he was weak. He was taking the easy way out. He wasn't Michael Jordan, who won championships the right way. Never mind that Jordan had Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and Phil Jackson. Never mind that every single champion in NBA history had help. The double standard was crushing, but what came next was worse. Because what happened in Miami during those first few months wasn't just criticism, it was hatred on a level that no athlete in modern sports had ever experienced. And the darkest part, it was only beginning. October 20. The season hadn't even started yet, and Miami had already become a war zone. LeBron, Wade and Bosh held a welcome party at American Airlines Arena. The not 1, not 2, not 3 speech. They were celebrating, dancing, having fun. To them, it was about bringing excitement to the fans. To everyone else, it was arrogance. It was disrespect. It was proof that LeBron didn't understand what it meant to be a champion. The backlash was nuclear. Every sports analyst, every former player, every fan with a Twitter account was calling them out. Charles Barkley said they whined their way to a championship before they even played a game. Michael Jordan's former teammates were doing interview after interview, explaining why LeBron would never be on MJ's level. But the media criticism wasn't the worst part. What happened in the streets was something different entirely. Miami's South Beach is normally paradise. Palm trees, ocean breeze, beautiful people everywhere. But for LeBron, it became a prison. He couldn't go to a restaurant without people shouting at him. Not friendly banter, genuine anger. He couldn't take his kids to the park without someone filming him, waiting for him to mess up, hoping to catch him looking unhappy so they could say, "See." He regrets leaving Cleveland. His wife, Savannah, told reporters years later that those first few months in Miami were the hardest period of their entire relationship. And they had been together since high school, through poverty in Akron, through the pressure of being an NBA prodigy at 16, through everything. But this was different. Every single night, the arena was filled with opposing fans who came just to boo him. In Philadelphia, someone threw a battery at him. In Cleveland, the hatred was so intense that security had to be tripled. The Cavaliers organization hung up a banner that said "Quitness," with his silhouette, mocking his Nike slogan "Witness." And the basketball was a disaster. The Miami Heat started the 29 wins, 8 losses, with 3 of the top 15 players in the NBA on the same team they were barely above. The national media was having a field day. Every talking head on TV was saying the same thing. "I told you so. You can't just buy a championship." LeBron doesn't have what it takes. But here's what was really happening behind the scenes. LeBron James had spent his entire career being the guy. Every play ran through him. Every decision was his. He had the ball in his hands, and he controlled everything. Now suddenly, he was sharing the court with Dwayne Wade, who had already won a championship in 2006 and was Miami's hero. This was Wade's city, Wade's team, Wade's house. And LeBron, he didn't know how to be the second option. Neither did Wade. Their coach, Eric Spoelstra, was only 40 years old and nobody respected him. Pat Riley, the legendary Heat executive, was breathing down everyone's neck from the front office. The chemistry was broken. The rotations were awkward. The plays didn't flow. In January 2011, there were legitimate rumors that LeBron wanted out, that he was already regretting the decision, that he was calling his agent and asking if there was any way to undo it all. Then came the turning point that nobody talks about. The Miami Heat traveled to Cleveland for the first time since LeBron left. And what happened that night would haunt him for the rest of his life. The energy in Quicken Loans Arena that night wasn't just hostile. It was demonic. 20,562 people showed up for one reason: to destroy LeBron James emotionally. They wanted him to feel their pain. They wanted him to suffer. Before the game even started, they played a video on the Jumbo. It showed all of LeBron's greatest moments as a Cavalier, his promise to bring a championship to Cleveland, his connection to the city. Then it ended with the words, "Gone, forgotten, forgiven, never." The crowd erupted, not in cheers, in rage. When LeBron took the court for warm-ups, the boos were so loud that his teammates couldn't hear each other shouting. Security guards formed a line between the court and the crowd, not because of physical danger necessarily, but because the hatred was so thick you could feel it in the air. The game itself was surreal. Every time LeBron touched the ball, traitor, traitor, traitor. Every time he missed a shot, the crowd went insane with joy. Every time he made a shot, the arena went silent in bitter disappointment. His mother, Gloria, was sitting courtside, and people were screaming at her. Grown adults yelling at a woman who raised her son in poverty, worked 3 jobs to keep him fed, sacrificed everything so he could chase his dream. The Heat won the game, 180. But when he walked off that court, something inside him had broken. In the locker room after the game, nobody said a word. His teammates didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who just experienced that? But the Cleveland game was just preparation, because 2 months later, LeBron James would face something even worse. June 20, the Miami Heat had fought through the playoffs and made it to the NBA Finals against the Dallas Mavericks. This was it. This was LeBron's chance to prove everyone wrong, to show that the decision was the right move, to finally become a champion. Game 1, lost. Game 2, won. But LeBron struggled. Game 3, lost. Game 4, this was the game that destroyed him. Fourth quarter, the Heat were losing. LeBron had the ball with under 2 minutes left. This was his moment. His chance to be Michael Jordan. His chance to be Kobe Bryant. His chance to be clutch. He passed the ball, not because it was the right basketball play, but because he was afraid. You could see it in his eye, the weight of the criticism, the hatred, the expectations. It had all become too much. He wasn't playing basketball anymore. He was trying to survive. Dallas won Game 4, then Game 5, then The Mavericks were champions. And Dirk Nowitzki, a player who had been criticized for years for not being tough enough, had just outplayed LeBron James in the clutch. The media destruction was immediate, and it was complete. LeBron James is not a closer. LeBron will never be a champion. The decision was the worst move in sports history. He doesn't have the killer instinct. Skip Bayless, the sports commentator, who had made a career out of hating LeBron, went on television and said something that cut deeper than anything else. LeBron James quit. He gave up, and we all saw it. And the worst part, deep down, LeBron knew it was true. But nobody knew what happened that night when he got home. Nobody knew what he told his family. And nobody knew that in that moment of complete darkness, LeBron James made a decision that would change everything. June 12, 11:47 p.m. LeBron James walked into his Miami home after losing the championship. Savannah was waiting for him. So were his mother, Gloria, and his 2 sons, LeBron Jr. and Bryce. They had watched the game. They had seen him struggle. They had heard the commentators destroy him on national television. The house was silent. LeBron sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. For several minutes, nobody said anything. Then his mother, Gloria, the woman who had raised him alone, who had moved them from apartment to apartment in Akron when they had nothing, who had never given up on him, said 5 words. Baby, you have to decide. Not, it's okay. Not, you'll get them next year. Not, the refs were bad. Or your teammates didn't show up. You have to decide. And that's when LeBron James looked up at his family and said something that nobody who heard it that night will ever forget. His voice was shaking. His eyes were red, and the words came out like he was confessing a sin. I'm afraid. I've been afraid my whole life. I'm afraid of failing you. I'm afraid of failing Cleveland. I'm afraid of failing everyone who believed in me. And tonight, I let that fear control me. I became small, and I don't know if I can come back from this. The room went silent. His mother started crying. Savannah grabbed his hand. His son's too young to fully understand. Knew something important was happening. Then Gloria James, this woman who had been through everything, who had been 16 years old when she had LeBron, who had been called every name in the book by people who didn't know her, who had watched her son get crucified on television for months, said this. When I was your age, I was living in a 1-room apartment with no electricity. I was feeding you cereal with water because I couldn't afford milk. Every single day, I was afraid you wouldn't have clothes, afraid you wouldn't eat, afraid that this life would break you before you ever got a chance. But I decided something. I decided that my fear didn't get to make my decisions, my love did. So now you have to decide, is your fear bigger than your love for this game? Because if it is, quit. Come home. Nobody would blame you. But if your love is bigger, then you know what you have to do. LeBron sat there for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to his bedroom, and closed the door. Nobody saw him for the rest of the night. But when he woke up the next morning, something had changed. What happened over the next 14 months wasn't just a redemption story. It was a complete transformation. Because LeBron James didn't just become a better basketball player, he became something nobody thought he could be. Summer 20. While the world was celebrating Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks, LeBron James disappeared. No interviews, no social media, no public appearances. He went into what his trainer, Mike Mancias, later called the cave. Every morning at 5 a.m., LeBron was in the gym, not practicing the things he was already good at, practicing the things he had failed at: post moves, free throws, fourth-quarter decision-making. He watched film of Michael Jordan in the 1998 finals. He studied Kobe Bryant's footwork. He analyzed Dirk's performance against him and broke down every single play where he had been afraid. But the physical training was only half of it. The mental transformation was even more intense. LeBron started working with a sports psychologist, not because he was broken, but because he wanted to understand his own mind. Why did he pass in the fourth quarter of Game 4? Why did the criticism affect him so much? Why couldn't he silence the noise? The answer was complicated, but also simple. He cared too much about what people thought. He wanted to be liked. He wanted to be the hero. And when Cleveland turned on him, when the world called him a villain, he didn't know how to process it. So he made a choice. He decided to embrace it. If they wanted a villain, he'd give them a villain, but not the kind they expected. He would become the most dominant, unstoppable force in basketball. He would win so much that it wouldn't matter what they said. The results would speak for themselves. When the 2011-12 season started, the difference was immediate. LeBron wasn't hesitating anymore. He wasn't second-guessing. He was attacking. Every game, every possession, every moment. The Heat started 11 times, then 26. By January, they were the best team in the NBA, and it wasn't close. But the real test was coming. June 20, 1 year after the worst moment of his career, LeBron James was back in the NBA Finals, this time against the Oklahoma City Thunder, a young, hungry team, led by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. The media narrative was already forming. Can LeBron actually win when it matters? Game 1. In Oklahoma City, LeBron scored 30 points. Heat won. Game 2. LeBron scored 32. Heat won. The series shifted to Miami. For games 3 and 4, the Thunder won both games, tying the series. Suddenly,
The old doubts were creeping back. Here we go again. LeBron's going to choke. Game 5 in Miami was the moment everything changed. Fourth quarter, score tied, 3 minutes left. LeBron had the ball at the top of the key. Kevin Durant was guarding him. The entire arena was holding its breath. This was the exact situation where he had failed 1 year ago. This was his demon. This was his test. LeBron drove left, exploded to the basket, and threw down a dunk, so violent that the rim shook. Then he stared at the crowd, not celebrating, acknowledging, "I'm here, I'm not afraid anymore." The Heat won Game 5. Then they went back to Boston for Game 6. And LeBron did something that people still talk about today. He scored 45 points, grabbed 15 rebounds, and played like a man possessed. In the fourth quarter, with elimination on the line, he scored 15 straight points. No hesitation, no fear, pure dominance. After the game, LeBron walked off the court with tears streaming down his face. Not tears of joy, tears of relief, like a weight he'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Game 7 in Miami, NBA championship on the line. LeBron scored 26 points and grabbed 11 rebounds. When the final buzzer sounded, he collapsed on the court. His teammates piled on top of him. Dwayne Wade was crying. Chris Bosh was screaming. But LeBron, he was quiet, because he knew this was only the beginning. But winning one championship wasn't enough to erase the decision. It wasn't enough to make people forgive him. And it definitely wasn't enough to answer the biggest question of his career. Could he ever go back to Cleveland? The 2012-13 season was different. LeBron James wasn't fighting for redemption anymore. He was building a legacy. The Heat went 66, the second best record in franchise history. LeBron won his 4th MVP award, but more importantly, he was playing with a joy that nobody had seen before. He was smiling again, laughing with his teammates, doing funny interviews. The bitterness from 2011 was gone, replaced by something else: confidence. The playoffs were a massacre. The Heat swept the Milwaukee Bucks. They destroyed the Chicago Bulls. They beat the Indiana Pacers in 7 brutal games. And then they faced the San Antonio Spurs in what would become one of the greatest final series in NBA history. Game 6 in Miami, the Heat were down 3-2 in the series. If they lost this game, it was over. With 28 seconds left, the Spurs were up by 5 points. The San Antonio fans in the arena were already celebrating. The championship trophy was literally being wheeled onto the court.
Then Ray Allen hit the most clutch three-pointer in NBA history. Overtime. The Heat won. The Heat won. Game 7 was never close. LeBron scored 37 points and grabbed 12 rebounds. Back-to-back championships. 2 finals MVPs. The doubters were running out of arguments, but LeBron knew something that nobody else did. He knew that winning in Miami with 2 other superstars would never fully erase the decision. There was only one way to complete his redemption. Only one way to silence every critic. Only one way to come home. July 11th, LeBron James published an essay in Sports Illustrated titled, "I'm Coming Home." Not a TV special, not a party, a simple, heartfelt letter explaining why he was returning to Cleveland. In Northeast Ohio, nothing is given. Everything is earned. You work for what you have. I'm ready to accept the challenge. I'm coming home. The reaction was shocking. Cleveland, the city that had burned his jersey 4 years earlier, erupted in celebration. People were crying in the streets. Fans who had called him a traitor were now calling him a hero. Even Dan Gilbert, the owner who wrote that angry letter in Comic Sans, released a statement welcoming him back. But LeBron knew the job wasn't finished. He had won 2 championships in Miami, but those championships didn't mean the same thing as one in Cleveland would. Cleveland had never won a championship in any major sport since 1964. 50 years of suffering, 50 years of heartbreak, 50 years of being mocked by the rest of the country. LeBron was coming home to end that suffering. But it wouldn't be easy. The 2014-15 season was a disaster. Kevin Love got injured. Kyrie Irving got injured. In the finals against the Golden State Warriors, LeBron played some of the best basketball of his career, but the Heat lost in 6 games. The critics returned. See, he can't win without a super team. Then came the Warriors set an NBA record with 73 wins in the regular season. They had Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. They were unstoppable. In the finals, they jumped out to a 3-1 series lead. No team in NBA history had ever come back from down 3-1 in the final. LeBron looked at that challenge and smiled, because this was exactly what his mother had taught him that night in 20. Love is bigger than fear. Game 7, June 19, 2016. Cleveland Cavaliers vs. Golden State Warriors. NBA championship on the line. The score was tied 89-89, with less than 2 minutes left. Andre Iguodala had the ball and was going in for what looked like an easy layup that would give the Warriors the lead. The championship was slipping away. Then LeBron James came flying out of nowhere, from behind, running full speed. He jumped so high that he looked like he was defying physics, and he blocked that shot so clean, so perfect, so impossibly athletic, that the entire basketball world stopped breathing. The block. That's all it's called now, just the block. Because there's only one block that mattered. The block that saved a championship. The block that ended 52 years of Cleveland sports suffering. The block that answered every single criticism that had ever been thrown at LeBron James. After that play, Kyrie Irving hit a three-pointer to give the Cavaliers the lead. They held on and won 93-100. When the final buzzer sounded, LeBron fell to the ground and sobbed. Not cried, sobbed. Like all the pain, all the criticism, all the doubt, all the fear from 2011 was finally washing away. In the locker room after the game, LeBron was asked what this championship meant. He looked at the camera with tears in his eyes and said, "Cleveland, this is for you." But the story doesn't end there, because what LeBron James did after winning that championship would prove that the transformation that started on that dark night in 2011 was real. It was permanent. It was who he had become. After bringing a championship to Cleveland, LeBron could have relaxed. He could have coasted. He had silenced the critics. He had redeemed the decision. He had proven he was one of the greatest players of all time. But remember what his mother told him. Love is bigger than fear. And LeBron's love wasn't just for basketball. It was for his community. For kids who grew up the way he did. For families struggling the way his family struggled. In 2018, LeBron opened the I Promise School in Akron, Ohio. Not just a donation. Not just his name on a building. An actual school that he funded, where at-risk kids would get free education, free meals, free college tuition, and family support services. He put millions of his own money into it, because he remembered being that kid. He remembered being hungry. He remembered his mom working 3 jobs. He remembered thinking that maybe there was no way out. The I Promise School has since helped hundreds of kids graduate who might have dropped out. It's provided support to families who were on the verge of homelessness. It's given kids opportunities they never would have had. And LeBron didn't stop there. He became one of the most vocal athletes in the world on social justice issues. When other athletes were told to shut up and dribble, LeBron spoke louder. When people criticized him for being political, he didn't back down. Because that night in 2011, when he admitted to his family that he was afraid, he learned something crucial. The fear of criticism is nothing compared to the fear of staying silent when you have a platform to make a difference. Here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. We were wrong about LeBron James. Not about his basketball in 2011. He did struggle in those finals. But we were wrong about his character. We were wrong about who he was as a person. We were wrong to burn his jersey. We were wrong to treat him like a villain for making a career decision. Think about it. If you were 25 years old and you had spent 7 years at a company that wasn't giving you the resources to succeed, wouldn't you leave? If your dream was to be the best in your field, wouldn't you go somewhere where you could actually achieve that dream? But because LeBron did it on television, because he was awkward in how he announced it, we crucified him. And the saddest part, he was going through all of that criticism, while also dealing with the normal struggles of being human. He was a father trying to protect his kids from seeing their dad get destroyed on television. He was a son watching his mother get harassed. He was a husband trying to keep his marriage strong, while the whole world was watching. That night when he told his family he was afraid, he wasn't just talking about basketball. He was talking about life, about the pressure we all feel when everyone is watching, about the fear of not being good enough, about the weight of expectations. And his mother's response, "Love is bigger than fear," isn't just basketball advice, it's life advice. How many of us make decisions based on fear instead of love? How many times do we stay in situations that make us miserable because we're afraid of what people will think if we leave? How many times do we play it safe
instead of taking a risk because we're terrified of failing publicly. LeBron's journey from 2011 to 2016 is the journey we all have to make at some point. The journey from fear to love, from worrying about what everyone thinks, to knowing who you are, from needing validation to validating yourself. Fast forward to today, LeBron James is 40 years old. He's won 4 championships, 4 MVPs, and countless other awards. He's widely considered one of the 2 or 3 greatest basketball players in history. He's a billionaire. He's a successful businessman, a movie producer, an activist, and a philanthropist. But more importantly, he's still married to his high school sweetheart. He's still close with his mother. His kids are thriving. The I Promise school is expanding. He's using his platform to fight for voting rights, education reform, and social justice. And here's the most beautiful part. Cleveland loves him. Again, the city that burned his jersey now has murals of him on buildings. Kids wear his jersey proudly. When he announced he was leaving Cleveland again in 2018 to go to the Lakers, there was no anger, just gratitude. Because he had done what he promised. He brought them a championship. He came home and delivered. Even his relationship with Dan Gilbert, the owner who wrote that brutal letter, had healed. They worked together. They won together. They forgave each other. That's the power of what happened on that night in 2011, when LeBron admitted his fear. It set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just him, but everyone around him. It taught us that vulnerability isn't weakness. That admitting you're afraid is the first step to becoming fearless. That falling down isn't the end of the story. It's just the middle. But there's one more piece to this story. One more thing that ties everything together. Because years later, LeBron was asked about that night, about what his mother told him, about how he found the strength to come back. And his answer revealed something that changes how we understand his entire journey. That's section 15, the real secret, what he never told anyone. In a rare, deeply personal interview in LeBron James finally revealed what happened after that conversation with his family after his mother told him that love was bigger than fear. After he went to his room and closed the door, he sat alone in the dark for hours, and he made a list. Not a list of basketball skills to improve, not a list of teams to beat, a list of everyone who had been there for him. His mother, who raised him alone, Savannah, who loved him before he was famous. His kids, who looked up to him, his hometown of Akron, which shaped him, the coaches who believed in him, the teammates who trusted him. Then, he made a second list, a list of everyone who was depending on him. Kids in Akron who saw him as proof that they could make it out. Young athletes, who needed to see that it was okay to struggle. Families, who needed to see that even when you fall, you can get back up. And then he made a promise. He wrote it on a piece of paper, folded it up, and put it in his wallet. He's carried that piece of paper with him for over a decade. He's never shown it to anyone. He's never told anyone what it says. But in that 2020 interview, he finally revealed it. I will not let fear make me small. I will not let criticism silence me. I will not let failure define me. I will play for everyone who believes in me, and I will play for everyone who doesn't, because they need to see this more than anyone. That piece of paper was in his wallet when he won the championship. It was there when he came back to Cleveland in 2014. It was there when he made the block in 2016. It's still there today, because that night in 2011, LeBron James learned the most important lesson of his life. The people who love you will love you even when you fail, and the people who hate you will hate you even when you succeed. So the only opinion that matters is your own. The only question that matters is, did you give everything you had? So what did LeBron tell his family that night that changed everything? He told them the truth. He told them he was afraid. He told them he was struggling. He told them he didn't know if he was strong enough. And by being vulnerable, by admitting his weakness, he found his strength. That's the lesson we all need to hear. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to fail. What's not okay is pretending you're fine when you're not. What's not okay is carrying that weight alone. What's not okay is letting fear make your decisions. LeBron's journey from the dark night of June 12 to the championship celebration on June 19, 2016, wasn't just about basketball. It was about becoming who you're supposed to be. It was about choosing love over fear. It was about learning that the greatest strength isn't never falling down, it's getting back up. Today, when LeBron talks to young athletes, He doesn't tell them about the book. He doesn't tell them about the championships. He tells them about that night. He tells them about sitting on his couch, admitting he was afraid, and hearing his mother say, "Love is bigger than fear," because that's the real story. That's the transformation. That's what changed everything. Not the decision to go to Miami, not the decision to come back to Cleveland, the decision to be honest about his fear and choose to be brave anyway. So the next time you're facing something that terrifies you, remember LeBron on that couch in 2011. Remember that even kings get afraid. But the difference between a king and everyone else isn't that they don't feel fear, it's that they don't let fear decide.